Hey everybody, welcome to your readings for the week. These are the readings for the week ending February 18th. Still in Aquarius season. Not that I have any Aquarians on this list. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get to those readings. We're gonna start as we always do with Darcy. We continue to have Uranus in Taurus. I'm not gonna stop saying it because it's gonna happen for like the next few years or so. We're gonna kick off the week with Uranus in opposition with the moon, which is gonna be a little bit difficult, I think. Uranus still continues to be focused on that inner trauma space, so your trauma closet a little bit, and the moon's focus is on your day-to-day schedule. I kind of feel this playing out for you in a couple of different ways. The biggest being that it just seems like you've got carefully laid out plans for that day, and somebody's got to come in and try and change that. And while I feel like a lot of the time you're accommodating to that, either it's just so many changes that are taking place, or it's something along the lines of, these changes could have been implemented before without having to do everything at the last minute, if that makes sense. So a little frustration there. Nothing major or anything like that. It's just, I really feel that this is a lesson for you to speak up. I kind of feel like a lot of times you tend to accommodate because it's just easier that way. And I just feel that this is going to be one of those times where you're not going to want to accommodate, and they're not going to like that. Unfortunately, it's too bad for them though. As we move on to Monday, that breaks up, which is cool. We are square with any planets in Aquarius free all the way up until Thursday, when Mercury moves into a square with Uranus, and that is going to continue through next week. But I would say probably the week afterwards, that'll be gone, and then we are officially done. I swear, I know I've been saying it for a long time, but no, we are officially done with that mess now, which is good. Focus for Mercury is long-term goals. So again, because it's a bit of a challenge, we're looking at past experiences that have taken place that um sort of make it feel like you can't even, every time you lay down goals, you just can't do it, whether these are past experiences that you created or other people created, or even in some cases a little bit of both. This tends to happen. So first of all, when these roots come up, they're not, their intention is not to come up and stop you. I know that it feels like that is the case, but actually no, their intention is to come up and remind you that you allowed these specific things to hold you back, even if somebody else had control of this, or even if somebody else was responsible for this. Even as a child, you did allow it to happen in some way. And so it's basically coming up to remind you not to allow that to happen this time, not to remind you that you were unsuccessful before, and chances are you're going to be unsuccessful now. That's absolutely not true. You're only unsuccessful if you allow your stinking thinking to hold you back, basically. So it comes down to this: are you going to overcome the past, or are you going to let the past rule you? And I know you're going to make the right decision. So that's what I have for you, Darcy. And I'm going to move on to my pal Jeannette. We continue to have Mars in Gemini in a grand sextile with Mercury and Jupiter. Pardon me. This week, Mars is focused on the cusp of self, on the outside, and your trauma closet. So all that gummy, mushy, emotional crap that you keep on the inside. And You know, as some intellectuals, Geminis and Aquarians are very similar to that, tend to hide that very, very well. So how does your inner trauma really help you? Well, of course, you know, it can help you. It doesn't necessarily just hold you back. It can help you. It helps you a lot more when you release it. And I feel like releasing some of this anger, old anger over some of these situations is helpful towards moving towards success, specifically when it comes to your long-term goals. And Jupiter is all about expansion and growth in your support system. You have a fantastic support system, a much bigger support system than most people that I know. And I feel like, especially right now, after what you've been through, you just have such a huge cheerleading squad behind you. Sometimes it's actually kind of daunting. It sort of feels like all these people have expectations on you, and it gets a little bit scary. So I feel like it's really your perception that needs to change on this in order for it to be not quite so scary. Don't think of it as you're letting all these people down. Think of it as whether you succeed or fail or both, you have a support system to fall back on, and that's really all that matters, regardless of what happens and how you get there. And remember that failure is not an ultimate end all thing either. If you try it and it doesn't work, try it again a different way and see what happens. That's how people are successful. So that's what I have for you, my dear. And I'm going to move on to Connie. Let's take a look. No moon. Yay, no moon. We just have the dark moon, also known as the Lilith, and she is moving retrograde this week. So we start off with a little bit of focus on the home, but she moves into focus on the mind and how the mind works. Actually, for you, this is really interesting because I feel like, obviously, when you are home, the time that you're thinking about things you would do more often at home than anywhere else, although I'm sure that you do awful lot of it driving too. At least my mind's always going a mile a minute when I'm driving. But I do feel like part of that is most of that is taking place at home, honestly, when you don't have anything to do necessarily. What's interesting about this to me is, and we're moving into about 3 to 4 weeks of focusing just on how your mind works. And so this is really the beginnings of that for you. And it's a really good time to pay attention to how your mind tends to wander and where it tends to wander to. Most of the time we don't pay attention to that, and it just does what it does, and we don't know how often it does it. We don't know necessarily how long it goes on. And what we're not realizing is how much of an effect it has on everything else. Now, you and I have talked about this a lot, so obviously you do know that it has a huge effect. But I also feel like, even though you know that, it's a good time to start working on how to avoid that as much as possible. So doing things like giving yourself a time limit when you're faced with a difficulty and you're frustrated and you need to be angry. Give yourself 20 minutes to be angry or 10 minutes to be angry. Go over it and go over what you did say, what you should have said, blah blah blah, whatever, right? So that's a good thing to do. The other thing is to really pay attention to how often these things come up when they're not standing in front of you. So, for instance, you're at home, you haven't talked to anybody in your family at all. You see something in your house and it triggers this being on that merry-go-round kind of a thing. Being aware of those triggers in your environment is also really helpful, not because you can remove the triggers. I mean, that's the thing, but also so that you can, if you don't want to remove the item, maybe rework it so it's not triggering you as often. So instead of if you've identified that your mind automatically goes to thinking on an emotional level when looking at this piece, you start to rework your mind to think on a different level, or to just omit that. I don't want to think about those people when I look at this piece of art, for example. I know that's not a great example, but it was the only one I can come up with in the moment. The other thing is I feel like it's important also to look at, and when we're talking about Lilith and the dark moon, it's all about change, and she's all about change. So we're looking at changing the way that we think about things, the way that we're processing information. So we'll go to clients. If you have a ton of clients that day, you can either be thinking, yay, I have a ton of clients today, or you could be thinking, oh my God, what a long drawn out day it's going to be. And whichever way you think, and we always go one way or the other, it's our automatic reaction. I'm going to assume yours is similar to mine. Oh my God, I got so much to do. Putting the right kind of energy into it. So you also want to be aware of how your mind reacts to certain things throughout the day, specifically your schedule. You never know. You may not be putting the energy into your clients that maybe you should be putting into them, because you're not getting excited about the fact that you have clients. And while sometimes it's hard to get excited about working, it is exciting to make money. So we really want to put it in the right context. When you think about it, it is helpful. So that's what I have for you, Connie. And I'm going to move on to Jenny. No planets in Leo this week. We do have the Lilith or dark moon continues to influence your sign. Looks like she's starting to move out of your sign, and then she goes retrograde and moves right back on in. So at the beginning of the week, very much focused on the home, the environment, but we're also moving into focus on the mind and how the mind works. And this is going to be a focus now for the next few weeks, actually, is focus on the mind and how the mind works. And it's very interesting, because our minds are programmed, whether we realize they're programmed or not. I know you do, but our minds are programmed, and they have an automatic way they go every single time. So I just used in the previous readings example, you have a heavy load of clients that day. This time of year, I'm sure you always do. You have a heavy amount of clients that day, and you can look at it as awesome, look at how much money I'm making today. Or you can look at it as, oh my God, I'm going to be so busy, and I don't even know if I have the energy. Sometimes it's hard not to look at it that way, by the way. I mean, we all have our days that are just not high energy days. And I totally do get that. And with the nature of what you do and the time of year, I also get that it's really hard to dig out that mindset. I do. But the more you focus your mind in that direction, the easier it is to get through the day. I mean, if you think about it, if you walk into with a mindset of, oh my God, how am I going to get through this day? It is just going to drag on, and it's going to feel like it takes forever. Whereas if you're excited, it feels more like you're ticking everybody off your list and boom, it's done, kind of a thing. Bob's your uncle, so to speak. So it does make a really big difference. And I feel like most of the time you are really good at making the right choice in terms of how your brain manifests those things. But I also know that you have big decisions to make and you have a lot going on. And I just feel like it's almost like there's just not as much energy to go into what you normally do this year than there has been in the past. It's almost like it's more difficult for you to maintain that mindset, if that makes sense. And that is okay. It's okay to have difficulties. It's okay if for one day you can't muster up a good mindset. The point is that you're aware of it and that you're in control of it as much as you possibly can. Nobody's going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. Even the closest human being on earth to perfection is still not perfect. And that's not what it's about. It's about making sure that you make it as easy as you can for yourself, as often as you can. And that's really what that comes down to. And this week, because there's no influences with the moon or anything like that, it will be a little bit easier because you don't have those other things coming in to influence your thought process. So that's what I have for you this week. And I am going to move on to Linda. We have no planets in Virgo this week, not even the moon. So that's good. Focus is on those you love. I know that you are going to be moving here pretty soon. Which is good. Couple of things. Okay, there's a couple of things that I'm picking up from this. The first thing is I kind of feel like there's going to be a bit of an adjustment here with your husband in terms of this move. And I'm not 100% sure if this is how do I want to say this? I'm not sure if this is like mimicking what happened when you moved before, or if this is something like maybe somewhere I'm worried that what happened before is going to happen again in terms of the confusion that took place during the first move, or if this is something that you should be aware of. I'm just going to put it out there. If I'm fearing it and it doesn't happen, great. If you need to be aware of it and it does happen, at least I did my job, right? That's all that matters. And it's almost like, you move at the speed of, I don't even think it's been named. Okay. It's not even the speed of light. It's like somewhere in Linda Land speed over there. You just want to go, 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 go. You got a lot going on. And I just keep seeing like, like you're okay, now we got the car packed, let's go, and your husband's saying, where are we going? Like even though he knows where you're going, you have to remind him, kind of a thing. And it's just to have a little bit of patience with that. I mean, obviously it's frustrating when somebody is not on your energy level, and it doesn't matter why they're not on your energy level. It's frustrating. It's okay to be frustrated. It's not exactly okay to take it out on him, but I'm not saying that you will either. It's just, we all kind of feel like we get to that point we just explode, and you just have to be a little bit better about not doing that, I guess, is the way we want to go with that. The other thing I feel is I do see that there's an element of somebody supposed to be there to help you out who cancels or postpones, or something comes up with them. So there's a bit of a thing there. Again, it's basically, as much as we want things to run smoothly, they don't always run smoothly, and they don't always run on your time. Unfortunately, especially when other people are involved. So the more you can not be quite so structured in, I'm moving this piece of furniture at 10:15 and this piece of furniture at 12:30. The more you can be flexible for a couple of days at least, maybe even a week or so, the better. It'll just make the transition easier. Pardon me, all the way around, and you won't be quite so stressed out because you're putting yourself on this ridiculous time schedule, if that makes sense. Outside of that, that is what I have for you, Linda. And I'm going to move on to Maddie. We have no planets in Virgo this week. Focus is on those you love. And I'm not seeing your family popping up around here either. Actually, there's a couple of things popping up here. I feel like there's a couple of things. First of all, no, when I say those you love, I'm really seeing your boyfriend, your relationship being taking center stage this week, I should say. Not necessarily in a bad way either, but in a good way. I want to give the aunt advice of, you know, making sure you don't sacrifice yourself for somebody else, because it sometimes works out, but it doesn't always work out. But I don't think that that's really what it's about. I kind of feel like this week really is just about spending the time and enjoying the time. And, you know, as you get older and, you know, you work and you go to school and he works and maybe he goes to school, and, you know, you get so caught up in life that you start to feel like you're not really spending time together, if that makes sense. And being married to your uncle for 30 years, that's come up a lot, honestly, and it's something that comes up over and over and over again. And so this week, really, if you feel that that's coming up, it's important not just to spend time, but to maybe check the quality of your time. Maybe it's not a phone call, but actually going out on a date and just the two of you, and reconnecting with each other. Or you know, if you're doing overnight visits, make it special in some way. It's not just doing the same thing every single night. You know, let's make it a little bit special. It's just as important, I think, for us girls to do that for our men as it is for our men to do that for us girls too. Because they need to feel like they're appreciated for what they're bringing to the table also. So I kind of feel like this week really is just, you know, about really starting to cement that in your relationship a little bit, or making space for that in your relationship. And if there is, I kind of feel like it's you and your schedule that's a little bit more hectic than his schedule, but it's more of a, you want to sit down and have a conversation about it, not you don't, whatever you see girls do that is annoying, just don't do it. Okay. Don't whine about it. Don't demand it. Don't beg for it. Don't ever beg for anything. Actually, you're above that. You know, don't get mad about it. If there's an issue and you're just not feeling like you are getting the time that you need, then let's make some time. Let's schedule some time together. You know, that's really the way to fix that problem. Any other quote unquote stupid girl thing that we do, that girls tend to do, it doesn't work. Okay, I'm just about to tell you right now that almost none of them work, and it just makes you look ridiculous, and you're way too smart to look ridiculous, child. So yeah, have fun, make special time. It's not always up to him, sometimes it's up to you too. It's not always up to you, sometimes it's up to him too. And you know, sometimes people don't realize that they're not giving enough time unless you say something. So think about it that way. So that's what I have for you, darling. And I am going to move on to Theresa Demarco. We currently are focused on, Libra's focus is on those you love. Ceres continues to influence that in retrograde this week and next. Ceres is a very maternal influence, all about nurturing and motherhood and caring for others, compassion, empathy. All of those things are ruled by Ceres, and I know that you're full of all of those things. The issue is that Ceres is retrograde, and I feel that this is less about the nurturing that you're giving others and more about maybe feeling that you are needing some of that nurturing yourself lately, which happens from time to time. And just because, we're mothers and we're supposed to take care of everybody doesn't mean that we don't need to be taken care of every now and then. Or don't, maybe it's not even a need. It's just, it would be nice if somebody would take care of us every now and then. And I feel that you are getting that to a certain extent, but I also feel this is very specific type of nurturing here that we're talking about. And I kind of, there's a couple of things coming up from that. First of all, I kind of feel like part of this has to do with, I don't want to say not being, what's the word I'm looking for here? I kind of feel like, you know that feeling where sometimes it just feels like your kids are, they only come to you when they need something, and they are, it's not that they're never there to support you, but it always seems that their needs are more important than your needs, blah blah blah. I feel like this week that kind of mentality from somebody else just sort of gets overwhelming. And it's not even that you need anything specifically, but I kind of feel you getting to the point where it's just like, hey, you know what? It would be cool if this was reciprocated every now and then, just putting it out there. But obviously, you don't want to do it in a sarcastic way like I just did. That's really not going to be helpful for you. You want to sit down with the person and explain how you feel. A lot of times they just don't know that you feel that way because you're not expressing it. And of all the Libras that I've ever met, they never actually come out and tell the person that they have a problem with, that they're having a problem. And that's not a good thing at all. I mean, you just wind up being upset because nobody's doing anything about it, but they don't know because you didn't tell them about it. So you're setting yourself up for being upset over something that you absolutely had control over, but you chose not to say anything. It does not fix the problem. It just keeps you frustrated. And so I feel like this week, really the focus is to remove that frustration. If you are having issues, you need to open up and communicate to the person that this is an issue. I'm a big fan of relationships in all forms being a two-way street, and they have to be a two-way street. My husband always says there's no I in team. He's a Libra, there's no I in team. That's the truth. It takes two people to be a team, and they both have to work together. Otherwise, it's not a very functional team. So I'm a big fan of sitting down with somebody and saying, I have a problem I'd like to fix, and see if we can come to a solution to the problem. And I invite you to put a problem on the table also, in case you're having a problem that you would like to discuss, that you would like me to help work on with you. In my experience, it works pretty well. Actually, I have used this technique before. I use it a lot. In fact, my husband and I have this sort of open, we can always approach this situation and bring a problem to the table without offending the other person because we've put ourselves in the space of knowing that we can't get offended if somebody's having a problem. And there's no reason. We're not putting ourselves in a defensive place. We're putting ourselves in a growth place. And if you're in a growth place, you're not going to get defensive. So that's one way that you can sort of help to fix that problem. The other thing that I feel from you this week is I do feel, I don't know if there's just been a lot going on lately. And it's not just work, it's like work and then this and that. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, and I just feel like you're drained. And so I'm just being told to tell you to take a break, take a day off this week. Give yourself a day, regardless of what everybody else has planned. Give yourself a day to rest and to recoup and to regenerate yourself so that you can keep going without making yourself sick. So that is what I have for you, Theresa. Moving on to Regina, we are going to kick off the week with the moon in Scorpio. Yay. It's always a great week when it can, when you start it off on an emotional in an emotional place. We're going to kick off the week with the moon in opposition with Uranus. Uranus is very much focused on our trauma closet, so our internal emotional closet. Scorpio is focused on your day-to-day schedule. I kind of feel this playing out in terms of you have plans for the day. Somebody else comes in with their plans and expects you to just either rearrange your plans or forget your plans because it's all about them, which is really annoying and frustrating. And yes, if I were you, I would be like, screw that. I don't think so. First of all, this is the first time this has happened. And I feel like the reason why this person is so nonchalant about coming in and disrupting your plans is because this person is allowed to do it and has been allowed to do it before. And it's just that today you've decided that it ain't happening, and you're probably going to get a lot of resistance. So if you can try and make a compromise, that would be easier for sure. If you absolutely can't make a compromise, I would look at it this way: which one is more important, and delve into what is the most important without necessarily putting yourself in a position to where you're the one that always goes on the back burner, because that's not okay. As we move into Monday, the moon moves into a bit of a more favorable position. It is, by the end of Monday, will be out of your sign, but on its way out, it does move into a square with the sun and Saturn, which is in Aquarius. Little bit difficult as we're dealing with challenges in your schedule around work. So to me, that's maybe you're not on the schedule and they call you in, and all of a sudden you do have to go in and work, or your hours get changed all of a sudden. The good news is that the moon moves into a grand sextile with Venus, Neptune, Mercury, and Pluto. It's a lot of planets working together in your favor. Venus and Mercury are focused on your support system, and Mercury and Pluto are focused on your long-term goals. I kind of get the feeling, actually, a little bit, that this change in your schedule around work is almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, if that makes sense. Like, you're just sick and tired of dealing with this situation the way that you're dealing with the situation, and you just don't want to anymore. And sometimes for people, especially people who tend to be kind of passive and just sort of let things roll off because they don't want to deal with conflict, it doesn't take much before you just finally hit the roof and you're just like, that's it, I can't take this anymore. And so I kind of get the feeling that this is something that you have already talked to somebody about and said, hey, I can't have you changing my schedule around at a whim, like I'm just available all the time, and they're not listening. And so this difficult situation actually provides an opportunity for you to look at it in a different way. And rather than looking at it as nobody ever listens to me, go in there and be a little bit louder this time. I already told you you can't do that. Now, don't do it, or I'll be finding another job, kind of a thing. I'm not saying that that's exactly how you should approach it, but in my experience with work, you walk in there and they're all, oh yeah, we'll work with you and everything is great and you're gonna do your schedule however you want and blah blah blah, and then they change things once and you go, well, I'm not gonna make a big deal about it because it was only one time. But they're over there going, okay, she didn't make a big deal about it, so we're gonna do it again. And then the more you don't make a big deal about it, the more they think, okay, we can do whatever we want. And when you go in there and say, I'm not really cool with that, well, they've already been doing it. So they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And they keep doing it. Eventually, you have to go in there and make them listen in some way, shape, or form. It's not an easy thing. Nobody ever wants to do it. But in all honesty, if you don't, people just walk all over you all the time. And that's no way to live either. So that's what I have for you this week. Luckily, once the moon moves out of your sign, things calm down a little bit and it's not quite so crazy. It's kind of a crazy start to the week. Things kind of sort of calm down as you get through the rest of the week. Okay, let me get some water. Moving on to Theresa Sheppard, my friend who's always bebopping here, there, and everywhere. We are going to kick off the week with the moon in Scorpio, a little bit of a challenge, a little bit helpful. We're going to start with Sunday, the moon's opposition to Uranus. Uranus is focused on inner trauma, and the moon is focused on your daily schedule. To me, I kind of look at this as either cancellations, challenges, postponements, different things like that. They're frustrating. But this is more than frustrating. This is almost like it's pulling up roots of disrespect or not being heard, or like your schedule isn't important, your time isn't important. I think we women honestly go through this a lot, because as much as we have fought for women's rights and we have put all of these things in place to be able to stand on our own 2 feet, those old sort of perceptions are still there, and we still find in business that people don't listen to us quite the same as they listen to a man, and those little things like that. But I also see this kind of not just outside of business, but at home as well. Because you're a mom of boys, just like I am. And you have your husband there. And it does sometimes feel like the dynamic has never changed. Your mom, you take care of everybody and everything, and that's your job, and you shouldn't complain about it, and you don't need to be congratulated or thanked or anything, right? And that somebody can just come in and go, oh, did I forget to tell you that I have to go do this, when you've got your day planned out? And it's just like, oh yeah, it's not like I haven't been here a bazillion times before, but this time is different. This time, your kids are grown. This time, your husband should know better, because you've already told him a million times that you can't do that with the schedule that you have right now. This time, the moon is involved. So it's really hard not to be frustrated. And it's actually, what this does is it provides an opportunity to sit down and have a discussion, not an argument, Okay, you want to avoid an argument, but it does give you the opportunity to sit down and have a discussion with that person about why this can't happen anymore, why it is so difficult. Granted, if it's something that was not planned and it's an emergency situation that all of a sudden happens, I mean, honestly, there's nothing you can do about that, right? Those kinds of things happen. You can be frustrated all day long if you want to, that's fine. But there's nothing you can do about that. You can rail against it all you want, it's not going to be helpful. But if it is one of those situations where this person really should know better, it is definitely time to sit down with them and explain that just isn't going to work for you anymore. And of course, invite them to discuss anything that's bothering them as well, because of course, any relationship is a two-way street, and it needs to be a two-way street. As we move into Monday, the moon moves into a square with Saturn and the sun. Saturn is all about responsibility. The sun's house is where you shine. Both are focused on your career. So I am seeing some weird changes in your schedule around your career, which is kind of similar to what we were dealing with the day before, but this is in a completely different setting. Now we're dealing with career and the nature of your job that happens. But I also feel that this may be around a client that does this a lot. And it's just something that, again, needs to be addressed. I really feel the big lesson here is communication, specifically because the moon also moves into a grand sextile with Venus and Neptune, both focused on your support system, and Mercury, the talkative planet, and Pluto, both focused on your long-term goals. So first of all, people who don't keep their appointments really mess up your long-term goals. But at the same time, this is the world we live in right now. Apparently, we don't have to have proper manners anymore. So with that being said, people don't need to keep appointments either. Because that was something that used to be, using proper manners, and now it's just, it is what it is, right? We've kind of stepped away from that society-wise, which is unfortunate. The bottom line is that you can rail against change all you want to. That's not going to help you. Your responsibility, you need to take care of your responsibilities toward your career, but you don't have to sacrifice yourself and your energy in order to do it either. So, like, the big lesson here is all about communication. If things aren't working, don't internalize it. Don't hold it in until you explode. Say something in a very professional way, like only you can, of course, because that's really the only way that the issue is going to get fixed. So that's what I have for you, my dear. Moving on to my Sagittarian. Moving on to Sheri. Okay, let's see here. Focuses on relationships and a little bit of your day-to-day schedule. Tuesday, when the moon moves into Sagittarius and moves into opposition with Mars for the next 2 days. So we're looking at Tuesday and Wednesday. The moon is in opposition with Mars. Focus is on relationships. Mars focus is right on the cusp of self and that trauma closet. So a couple of things are actually going to come up from this, to be honest with you. First of all, on Tuesday, I see you having to rework your schedule in some way, which is kind of frustrating. It has nothing to do, I mean, I don't necessarily see that it's your fault necessarily. If it is, well then, whatever, you got to live with that. But even if it isn't, even if it's something else, I mean, it could be as little as I'm recording this now, tomorrow I'm taking my grandma to the doctor. This morning I was not taking her to the doctor. Now I'm taking her to the doctor tomorrow, because she's got to go to the doctor. I mean, I can't rail against it. I made a commitment to take care of her, and this is what I have to do. It's annoying that I have to rework everything, but Annoying is okay. Sometimes things get annoying. There's really no way around that. But I'm looking more at what's happening with this opposition as we move into Wednesday, as we become more focused on relationships here. Now, Mars is a planet that is very much associated with anger and being planted in that trauma place, our trauma closet, as I call it. We're talking about some pretty old anger coming up, and the moon being a part of that does not make that any easier, because now we're adding even more emotion to that than we really need to. But I do feel that there might be some relationships, and the moon's in Gemini, so it could be with a Gemini, but it could be with somebody else. I feel like this is a relationship where there is a lot of old anger, and it doesn't take much for it to come out. I mean, you are a Sagittarian. You know how this works, right? You know that all of a sudden it just takes one little something for you to go, okay, you know what? I'm not letting this one go this time. Screw you, right? You know who I'm thinking about too. You know exactly who I'm thinking about right now when I say this, and I have a sneaking suspicion that he may actually be the one that's causing this problem. And you know what? Perhaps it's time for you to really cut the ties, if that makes sense. You tried to help so many times. You've done so many things. You sacrificed so many things for this person. I know you know who I'm talking about. He's not there now. He's roaming around somewhere else. Um, you have to. You have to, for your own sanity. You also have to disconnect from what Matt's going through as much as possible. And I know how difficult that is. I know how much you want to help him, and how much you want to give him advice, and how much you want to do this and that, and, but let him do it and all that. You're going to make yourself crazy, because I see that the further and further and further you guys go, the more overwhelmed you're going to get when you're holding on to what he has to do, and what you have to do, and what you have to do for everybody else, right? You want to avoid that as much as possible. Otherwise, it's going to make you crazy. It's going to trigger you. Once you get triggered, bad things happen every time when you get triggered. So try to disconnect from that as much as possible. I don't mean don't care about what he's going through. I don't mean don't care about what his parents are going through. I just mean it's his responsibility. Let him do it, unless he needs help from you, and he will come to you and ask. In the same way that it is on your side as well. So that's what I have for you this week. Moving on to Peg, we continue to focus on relationships this week. The moon coming into Sagittarius on Tuesday and Wednesday moves into opposition with Mars in Gemini, and that's going to create a bit of a challenge for you, possibly for you and your husband, actually, because if I'm not mistaken, I do remember that he is a Gemini as well. Mars's focus is very much on the cusp of self and our secret inner emotional trauma closet. So we're talking old anger coming up. And with the moon involved, this sort of amplifies this old anger stuff coming up. So I feel like one of two things could be taking place through this. And this is Tuesday and Wednesday that the moon, this opposition is going on. One of two things could come up. Either I see a situation where there's a decision that needs to be made, and you and your husband aren't quite seeing eye to eye on the right decision that needs to be made, if that makes sense. And so while both of you are just stuck in I'm right, you're never going to get anywhere. So you have to work towards a compromise, if that makes sense. What I feel needs to be avoided, and I'm not sure from which side this is coming from, but what really needs to be avoided is lashing out at each other, or specific words that are geared towards attacking the other person. That's not going to be helpful in this discussion, and I'm only bringing this up because I feel that this type of communication is coming up around this discussion. So you want to be careful of that. The good news is the moon's grand sextile with Jupiter, as well as I do believe that is Mercury. And we're talking about Mercury and communication here. Mercury is focused on long-term goals, and Jupiter is focused on your support system. So while there may be some decisions that need to be made at home, for example, or while there may even be difficulties that are taking place at home right now, things are moving forward in terms of your long-term goals. And I'm actually feeling like a little bit of water. Hold on. I'm actually feeling like you've been connecting with specific people in regards to a specific project, and this is where these long-term goals are coming into. And it's almost like I'm feeling things are finally lining up in that, if that makes sense. And I'm not sure exactly what this project is, but I don't feel it's something that you're doing on your own. I feel like you're combining with other people in some way, or there are other people involved in this particular project. So there may have been, it may have seemed recently like things have been moving kind of slowly with that, but I'm literally getting the words, we're picking up the pace. So it's like things are starting to progress and move forward. So it's really exciting. And it seems like when things start to really take off, that's when all the crazy stuff comes in anyways, and just sort of makes it feel like you did all this work so that you can sit down and maybe argue with your husband, for example. It's annoying. It's not the end of the world. So that's what I have for you, Peg. And finally, I'm going to move on to Mama Sheri. We have the moon coming into Sagittarius Tuesday and Wednesday. Focus continues to be on relationships. The moon, when it comes into Sagittarius on Tuesday, is focused on your day-to-day schedule and in opposition with Mars. I feel like that day in particular, you may have your schedule all lined out, and either you have a couple of people that are demanding to be put on your schedule that day at the last minute, or somebody cancels or changes or wants to postpone or something. Either way, somebody's throwing a wrench in your perfectly planned schedule, which is annoying, but it's not the end of the world. I want to say, if this is somebody that does this often, it's time to talk to them about it, obviously, because you don't want to let them know that it's okay to continue to do this. I guess, because that's honestly what's going to happen if they keep doing it, number one. The moon also does move into a grand sextile with Jupiter and Mercury. Mercury is focused on long-term goals. Jupiter is focused on your support system. I kind of feel a couple of things coming from this, actually. Isn't it cool? Thank you for being awesome. I actually got it from my mother. I can believe that. You've been bopping around ideas in your head about where you want to go, which direction you want to go in, how you want to get there, kind of a thing. I think it's really important to write those ideas down and come up with a plan in terms of moving towards them, preferably without coming up with reasons as to why it's not going to work, if that makes sense. We all do it. And I know that you shouldn't do it, but you still do it because you're a human being, just like the rest of us, and we all do it. So I think that I also feel that it's a really good opportunity this week, especially the moon bringing this to light, to really pay attention to where your brain goes when you're planning these goals. If your brain is continuously going in this, I don't have a car, so I can't do that, so blah, 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 and you're always coming up with reasons why it's not going to work, it's never going to happen. And honestly, that's not what you want, right? So that's what I have for you this week, and that is what I have for everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out for the readings for the week. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thank you for watching. Hey, if you would like to be on this list, click the link below and you can be on this list with a reading every single week for as little as $10 a month. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. Make it a great week, everybody.